Hi. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here we are. Let me start by saying that I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for almost 5 years now. It's a nice neighborhood with manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses that all follow the same basic aesthetic guidelines. That's all fine and dandy. I knew what I was signing up for when I bought the place. What I didn't sign up for was Carolyn Peterson, or as everyone in the neighborhood secretly calls her, Queen Carolyn, the president of our homeowners association. Carolyn has been running our HOA with an iron fist for the past 3 years. She's in her mid-50s, always dressed like she's about to meet the Queen of England, with her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it gives her a permanent facelift. Her favorite pastime seems to be walking around the neighborhood with her clipboard, documenting every single violation she can find, no matter how minor. I'd managed to stay mostly under her radar until recently when I injured my back pretty badly. I slipped on some water in my kitchen and ended up with a herniated disc that required surgery. The recovery process has been slow and painful, and my doctor arranged for a visiting nurse to come to my home 3 times a week to help with physical therapy and wound care. The trouble started on a Tuesday afternoon when my nurse, Megan, came for her regular visit. Megan is an amazing professional, kind, and really good at her job. She usually parks in my driveway and stays for about an hour. On this particular day, I was in the middle of my physical therapy exercises when the doorbell rang repeatedly, like someone was trying to break the button. I hobbled to the door, still in pain from my exercises, and there stood Carolyn, clipboard in hand, and a scowl on her face that could curdle milk. "Excuse me," she said with a tone that was anything but excusing. "But there's an unauthorized vehicle in your driveway." I blinked at her, confused. "That's my nurse's car. She's here to help me recover from my back surgery." Carolyn's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Well, according to HOA Regulation 7.4.2, no commercial vehicles are allowed to be parked in residential driveways during daylight hours." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Carolyn, it's not a commercial vehicle. It's her personal car. She's a medical professional providing necessary care. It has a small logo on the door for her healthcare company," she said with a triumphant smirk. "That makes it commercial. She needs to move it immediately, or you'll be fined $100 per day." At this point, Megan came to the door, concerned about the commotion. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking between Carolyn and me. Before I could answer, Carolyn turned to Megan and spoke in the most condescending tone I've ever heard. "You need to move your vehicle right now. You're in violation of our HOA regulations." Megan, ever the professional, smiled politely. "I'm in the middle of providing medical care to my patient. I'll be done in about 30 minutes, and then I'll be on my way." Carolyn's face turned an alarming shade of red. "I don't care what you're doing. Rules are rules. Move it now, or I'm calling a tow truck." I'd had enough at this point. "Carolyn, please be reasonable. Megan is helping me recover from surgery. She'll be gone soon." "Reasonable?" she sputtered, her voice rising to a pitch that probably only dogs could hear clearly. "I am being perfectly reasonable. The rules apply to everyone. No exceptions." I tried to explain that there were actually exceptions for medical care providers in the HOA bylaws I had checked when I knew I'd be needing home care, but Carolyn wasn't having it. She turned on her heel and stomped off my porch, already dialing on her phone. Megan looked at me, concerned. "Should I move my car? I don't want to cause trouble for you." "Absolutely not," I assured her. "You're providing medical care, and you're legally allowed to be here. Let's continue with my therapy." We went back inside, and Megan continued my session, though I could tell she was worried. About 15 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of a tow truck backing up my driveway. I couldn't believe Carolyn had actually called them. I made my way outside as quickly as my injured back would allow, just in time to see a burly guy hooking up to Megan's car. Carolyn stood nearby, arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "Stop," I called out, wincing at the pain the sudden movement caused. "You can't tow this vehicle. It belongs to a medical professional who's currently providing care." The tow truck driver looked uncertainly between me and Carolyn. "Lady said it's an unauthorized commercial vehicle," he explained with a shrug. "It's my nurse's car," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing anger. "She's inside right now helping me recover from back surgery. Check the HOA bylaws." Section 12.3 specifically states that vehicles belonging to healthcare workers actively providing in-home care are exempt from parking restrictions. Carolyn scoffed loudly. That's ridiculous. There's no such exemption. But I was prepared. I had printed out the relevant section of the bylaws after my surgery, anticipating potential issues. I asked the tow truck driver to wait while I slowly made my way back inside to retrieve the document. When I returned and handed him the paperwork, he read it carefully, then nodded. Yep, says right here that medical professionals are exempt while providing care. He began unhooking Megan's car. Sorry for the trouble, ma'am. Carolyn snatched the paper from his hands, reading it with increasing fury. This must be outdated, she insisted, her voice shrill. I never approved this exemption. It was approved before you became president, Carolyn, I explained calmly. It's been in the bylaws for years. The tow truck driver, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, got back in his truck. Look, I can't tow a vehicle that's legally parked according to your own rules. Call the company again if you sort this out. And with that, he drove away. I thought that would be the end of it, but I severely underestimated Carolyn's determination to have her way. Her face contorted with rage as she watched the tow truck leave. This isn't over, she hissed at me before storming off down the street. I returned inside, feeling drained from the confrontation. Megan was concerned but continued with my treatment. Don't worry about it, I told her. She's all bark and no bite. Oh, how wrong I was. The next time Megan came for my therapy session, 2 days later, Carolyn was waiting. She had positioned herself in a lawn chair directly across from my house, as if she was settling in to watch a show. As soon as Megan parked in my driveway, Carolyn was on her feet, marching over with her clipboard. I opened the door before she could ring the bell, determined to head off another confrontation. Carolyn, we've been through this. Megan is allowed to park here while providing medical care. Carolyn ignored me completely, focusing on Megan instead. I've checked the bylaws more carefully, she said with a smirk. And while healthcare workers are exempt from the commercial vehicle restriction, they are not exempt from the visitor parking time limit of 45 minutes. Your sessions last an hour. That's a violation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Carolyn, are you seriously going to nitpick over 15 minutes? This is medical care we're talking about. Rules are rules, she repeated, her new favorite phrase, apparently. 15 minutes over is still a violation. Megan, bless her, remained calm. Mrs. Peterson, I understand your concern for the rules, but my patient's recovery depends on completing the full therapy session. Cutting it short could delay his healing process. Not my problem, Carolyn retorted coldly. Either you finish in 45 minutes, or you'll be towed. She held up her phone. I have the tow company on speed dial now. I was about to argue further when Megan touched my arm gently. Let's go inside and begin your therapy, she said quietly. Getting upset isn't good for your recovery. She was right, of course. So I reluctantly went back inside with her. But I couldn't focus on my exercises, too distracted by the knowledge that Carolyn was still outside, waiting like a vulture. 40 minutes into my session, the doorbell rang again. When I answered, there was Carolyn, tapping her watch. 5 minutes left, she announced with undisguised glee. That's when I lost my cool a bit. Carolyn, this is harassment. You're interfering with medical care, which could actually be illegal. Her eyes widened momentarily before narrowing again. Don't threaten me. I'm simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to when they moved here. I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you. I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. If Megan has to cut my therapy short and it affects my recovery, that's medical interference. Carolyn scoffed and walked away, but she didn't leave. She returned to her lawn chair and continued her watch. When Megan's session ran the full hour, as it needed to for my proper care, Carolyn was instantly back at my door, this time with her phone already dialing. That's it, she declared triumphantly. The tow truck is on its way, and you'll be receiving a fine for the violation. At this point, Megan stepped forward. Mrs. Peterson, I need to inform you that intentionally interfering with prescribed medical care can have serious legal consequences. I've documented this interaction and your previous one as part of my patient's medical record. Carolyn faltered for a moment, but quickly recovered her bravado. You can't intimidate me with empty threats. I know my rights as HOA president. What Carolyn didn't know was that Megan had indeed been documenting everything. including taking photos of Carolyn's stakeout and recording audio of our interactions, with my permission, of course. She had also consulted with her supervisor after the first incident, who had contacted the company's legal department. When the tow truck arrived, a different driver this time, Megan calmly approached him and explained the situation, showing him documentation from her healthcare company stating that interfering with her ability to provide care could be considered a criminal offense in our state. The driver wisely refused to tow the car and left. Carolyn was livid. "This is ridiculous. You can't just ignore the rules because you think you're special." "Actually, Carolyn," I said, finally having had enough, "there's something called medical necessity that supersedes HOA regulations. Maybe you should consult a lawyer before you continue this crusade." "Fine," she snapped. "If that's how you want to play it, I will." The next few days were blissfully Carolyn-free. I hoped she had finally seen reason, or at least realized she was treading on thin legal ice. But then came Monday, and with it, another visit from Megan. This time, Carolyn had escalated things to an alarming degree. She had recruited 2 other HOA board members to join her watch. And as soon as Megan pulled into my driveway, Carolyn physically blocked her path to my front door. "You are trespassing on HOA property," Carolyn declared loudly, though we were clearly on my private property. "You need to leave immediately." Megan attempted to step around her. "Ma'am, I'm here to provide medical care to my patient. Please step aside." That's when Carolyn did the unthinkable. She put her hands on Megan's shoulders and physically pushed her back. I said, "You are not welcome here during business hours. Leave now." I had been watching from my window and immediately called 911. "Hello, I need to report an assault. The president of my HOA just physically pushed my home healthcare nurse and is preventing her from entering my home to provide medical care." The dispatcher assured me they would send someone right away. Meanwhile, Megan had backed away from Carolyn and was recording the entire incident on her phone. The 2 other HOA board members, seeing things escalate quickly, distanced themselves from Carolyn and her actions. "Carolyn," I called from my doorway, "the police are on their way. You just physically assaulted a healthcare worker and are interfering with medical care. I strongly suggest you leave my property immediately." "Police?" she sputtered, her face paling slightly. "That's absurd. I'm enforcing HOA regulations. You can't call the police for that." I clarified. "I called them because you just committed assault by putting your hands on Megan and shoving her. That's a crime, Carolyn. HOA regulations don't give you the right to put your hands on people." Carolyn looked to her fellow board members for support, but they were already hurrying back to their own homes, wanting no part of this situation. Left alone, Carolyn's confidence finally began to crack. "I was just doing my job," she insisted, but her voice had lost its edge. When the police arrived a few minutes later, both Megan and I gave our statements, along with the video evidence Megan had captured. The 2 officers were professional, but clearly unimpressed with Carolyn's behavior. "Ma'am," one officer said to Carolyn, "do you understand that interfering with medical care providers is a serious offense, and physical assault, regardless of the circumstances, is a crime?" Carolyn's face had gone from red with anger to white with shock. "But I'm the HOA president," she kept repeating as if the title granted her immunity. "That may be," the officer replied patiently, "but it doesn't give you the right to touch anyone or prevent them from performing their job, especially when that job involves medical care." To my surprise, and I admit satisfaction, the officers informed Carolyn that she was being placed under arrest for simple assault and for interfering with medical care, which in our state is actually a separate offense carrying significant penalties. As they read Carolyn her rights and led her to the police car, the reality of the situation finally seemed to dawn on her. Her perfectly made-up face crumpled as they placed her in handcuffs. "This is outrageous," she cried out. "Do you know how much I've done for this community? I was just enforcing the rules." The aftermath came swiftly. Carolyn was charged with simple assault, a misdemeanor carrying up to a year in jail, and with interfering with medical care, which in our state is a Class E felony with potential penalties of 1 to 6 years in prison and fines up to $3,000. While she was released on bail, the judge issued a restraining order preventing her from coming within 50 feet of me or Megan. At the emergency HOA meeting called the following week, Carolyn showed up looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her hair was limp, her clothes wrinkled, and the smug expression she typically wore had been replaced by one of barely contained panic. When the board unanimously voted to remove her as president, citing conduct unbecoming of a representative of the community, her face collapsed in shock. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, her voice breaking as the reality of her situation finally sank in. "This is my community. I built it. I protected it." But as the gavel came down, confirming her removal, the look of utter disbelief on Carolyn's face said it all. Her reign of terror was finally over.